This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This table is really tilted.
Excuse me? Am I gonna get a chance to speak?
Maybe I should take that back.
Denied. Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Take a giant step for mankind.
Welcome to the Tilted Table with your hosts, Sean and Joe.
All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Tilted Table, the internet's answer to a question that no one asked. I am Sean Kabibi.
And I am Joey Joe, the Fraggy Mac.
And today we're going to talk about odd sports stories out of the realm of strange or really unique kind of things that have happened in the world of sports. We're not holding it to any specific sport. It doesn't have to be, like football or baseball, or it could be whatever. Mm-hmm. But really, really odd events that may have happened in the world of sports. And this was inspired by me. It was inspired by two stories. One I'm actually going to use, but I'll give the other one that I won't use as a real famous story about Eddie Brown.
Who's Eddie Brown?
So Eddie Brown was a guy who played one at bat.
One at bat?
And in the major leagues. I don't know the exact year.
Oh, he had one at bat.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And I don't know the year. It was in the 50s or 60s. But basically, he was a little person. He was not a baseball player, and the owner or the coach or whoever wanted to get a walk. And I don't know, obviously it had to be pre-decided before the game. I wish I knew more about the exact story of why this all went down. But he went out and he was playing for the St. Louis Browns, I think, at the time. So it has to be maybe in the 40s.
Yeah, I think it's about the 40s. That's like the days of Satchel Paige.
Yeah, going way back. Mm-hmm. And, of course, there's a strike zone. You send out somebody who's 3.5 feet tall. The strike zone is extremely difficult to hit.
It's like a 4-inch swath.
Yeah, and so I don't know if there was somebody on first or if maybe the bases were loaded. I'm not really sure, but yeah, they walked Eddie. I think his name was Eddie Brown. I'm almost positive, and that was it. That's his entire professional baseball career. And that story's always fascinated me. And baseball in particular, I think, always has really odd stories like that. Mm-hmm. So I thought, what about some other odd, events that have happened in sports? So that's where this, sort of is inspired from.
Almost like falls into that bucket of Ripley's Believe It or Not type things. It's so weird. You wonder if it actually happened.
Yeah, for sure.
And if it was anybody other than you, I would certainly take that story with a grain of salt. For sure.
I think the Eddie Brown is pretty well known. Like I'm going to say everybody. I don't know. I guess if you don't watch sports, you wouldn't necessarily know it. But if you talk to anybody that knows baseball in particular, they should know the Eddie Brown story.
So that's not in
I'm saying Eddie Brown, and I'm not 100% sure that's his name, but I'm almost positive that's his name.
You should have done your research before.
Well, I wasn't going to use that as one of the stories just because I think it's too well known. Mm-hmm. I was trying to think of things or could find things that aren't already known. Who wants to listen to a podcast where it's like, well, I already know that story. Mm-hmm. So,
well, some of the things are I think interesting in that it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. Like I'm not a big basketball fan. Well, let me rephrase that. I'm not a basketball fan at all. I'm a basketball fan of like the late 80s, early 90s, and like the glory years of Dominique Wilkins. And, all of those guys. And all the way back to the Bad Boys, the Detroit Pistons. Mm-hmm. I've always been a Dennis Rodman fan, mm-hmm. And so I think one of my favorite fun kind of sports related stories is basketball diplomacy. When Dennis Rodman went to North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un, to open dialogue about humanizing the dictator and establishing North Korean U.S.
It's about sports relations. Wasn't it about bringing basketball? Because isn't Kim Jong-un? He's like
he's a huge fan.
He's a big basketball guy, right?
And then, one of the things I liked, one of the best quotes to come out of the very first meeting, where Rodman, in front of all of the newscasters, says, "They've become friends for life," quote, end quote. And I think that was like the first time that, any sports figure had ever really inserted themselves into, a country like that.
Yeah.
So in terms of like kind of weird, interesting sports stories, I think Dennis Rodman traveling to North Korea on a unsanctioned diplomatic mission is pretty fascinating.
Well, I mean, my feeling about Dennis Rodman is that he's always kind of the bad boy, the outlier. He caused, I think, a lot of problems in the NBA at various times. So he's a maniac in his own way. And I think for him going to a country where the leader's a fucking maniac, they're a match made in heaven.
Well, it's kind of funny, when Dennis Rodman showed up to a book signing wearing a wedding dress.
Oh yeah.
And it was so shocking and jarring at that time. If something like that happened today, you'd be like, yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't be that shocking at all. Not at all.
But yeah, shout out Dennis Rodman and becoming a senior U.S. diplomat.
Yeah. Good for him. I've always liked Dennis Rodman, even though I think he did some shitty things. Remember that one time he kicked, was it a photographer on the sideline?
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't even know why he did that. I don't think I ever looked into it too deeply on why he would do something like that. Just stuff like that would irritated me about him. But I mean, come on, he was a great basketball player.
The Worm.
And he was entertaining as all hell.
Yeah, it's kind of like a more marketable version of Brian Bosworth.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So do you want to start? Or do you want me to start?
I'll let you start.
Okay, I'm going to go with the story of a man who was drafted by the NFL, and he did not find out that he was drafted by the NFL until 50 years after the fact. Yes. Okay. This is an amazing story. The guy's name is Norm. It's been pronounced two ways, either Michael or Michelle. Right, I'm going to go with Michael because it's spelled like Michael. So his name's Norm Michael. Of course, if you're drafted by the NFL, you might ask, well, how the hell would you not know? Right? Well, this is a long time ago. So this is 1944 and he was drafted. So we got to look at the time frame, right? There's not social media. There's not internet.
It was right in the middle of the war.
There was a war going on, right? I'm not sure the NFL was quite the league it would become and even 20 or 30 years after, right? So what happened with this guy was a fullback for Syracuse, and there was all these rumblings that he could, be drafted in the top, first round, or not drafted at all. Now, this is something that I had to figure out on my own. I didn't know this. The early era of the draft was not as scientific as it is now. They didn't have scouts back then. They didn't do these kinds of things. It was really kind of on the whim with a bunch of people in a room. And again, if you're going back to the 1940s, you don't have, a bunch of computers and, film crews. It's harder to get your hands on actual film. And of course, the science of studying all this stuff wasn't quite there yet. So a lot of times when a player would be considered a top pick, it was largely because somebody on the team or would spread the rumor like, have you seen the quarterback for Arkansas? This dude's amazing. And you just had to say that. And if you were a coach or some kind of NFL guy, I got around and everybody thought like, oh, must be the Arkansas quarterback's going to be great. And I mean, obviously they see games, so they knew who was good and who was not, but it really to be able to tell like this is a person that's going to thrive in the NFL or not wasn't as scientific as it is now. One of the examples of this is that, I can't remember what draft it was. I think it was in the late 30s. The entire first round draft of the first round, only 2 people actually made the cut.
Really?
Yeah. It's a famous draft where it's like of the first, I think at the time there wasn't obviously 32 teams. I think it was like maybe 20 teams or something.
Right.
Of the top 20 players, they didn't even get out of preseason. There's only 2 that got out of preseason. So that's how bad this was. So for Norm Michael, he's being told he could be drafted, maybe not. He's getting all these mixed signals. So he decides that he doesn't think he's going to get drafted. So he just joins the Army and goes out to Alabama to boot camp and gets shipped off, to go fight in World War II. And he was the 20th pick overall. And
who drafted him?
The Eagles did.
Okay.
And of course, there's no television. It's not televised or anything like that, right? So he's drafted, and they tried to get a hold of him, and they couldn't find him. And that's where the story sort of starts. And then he goes to war. He comes back home, and 50 years later, he's reading his local paper in Syracuse, and they're talking about all the players that were drafted by the NFL, all the Syracuse players that have ever been drafted by the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
He's reading the story and he's like, wait a second. Why the fuck is my name on this list? So he starts doing some investigation and he finds out, oh shit, in 1944 I was the 20th overall pick. No one ever told me. And he contacted, the Eagles, and they did their research and, sort of backtracked what had happened. And the story is they tried to find him, and they couldn't get a hold of him. And by the time they figured out, where he was already overseas. And that's where, they stopped. The only thing that hasn't been explained in this story is this guy had to have family.
Mm-hmm.
So you would think that,
It would have sent like a certified letter or a cablegram or something like that.
You would think that like a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, somebody would have gotten like, oh shit, he got drafted. Or they would have found out and, sent a letter.
Exactly.
And said, hey, I know you're over in, Germany,
check this out.
Fucking trying to kill the Fuhrer or wherever you're at. You were drafted, bruh. What? No, you never knew. But I don't know his family. It's possible he didn't have any family.
That's wild.
He could be kind of a lone wolf out there in the world. And
did you find out the end of the story when he contacted the Eagles and they did their homework and they're like, oh yeah, did they ever like get him a jersey or something interesting like that?
I didn't get anything like that, but it's such an odd story, and he took it with a grain of salt. He thought it was funny, and I get the impression from the interview that I saw that obviously football was not his priority. That's a different breed of person back in that day.
For sure.
During World War II, there were 18-year-olds that would, could be offered $1 million a year job, and they would have said, fuck that, I'm going, give me a gun. Right?
Patriotism.
That was the mentality of a lot of those people. So I don't think he thought too much about it. I think he just more of like, well, I didn't know I was drafted. It's a kooky story. I hope the Eagles got him a jersey. Yeah. They should retire his number.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
Whatever that number would have been.
The biggest thing to never have happened.
Yeah, the biggest thing to never have happened.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, man.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one.
I learned something new. Well, let me tell you something new.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of a sport called Yukigassen?
Say that again.
It's a sport called Yukigassen.
Yukigassen. I have never heard of it. Don't know anything about it.
I had not either. And so, and coming up with something like weird, obscure in the land of sports.
Mm-hmm.
So Yukigassen is an official sanctioned snowball fighting competition that originated in Japan. There's tournaments that take place all over the world in the countries that you would figure, as far as like Finland, Norway, Russia, Australia, Armenia. I thought that was interesting. And one of the things that I was like, man, I want to like join this league. So a Yukigassen game takes place between two official teams. Each team has 7 players. It's kind of like on a capture the flag type of basis. Okay. Players are eliminated when they get hit with a snowball, and there's a set number of snowballs that a team gets, and the number is 90.
Okay.
So there's actually special Yukigassen helmets that you have to wear. And all of the snowballs are made in advance into like an actual, I'm sure they've got like some, like a egg carton or something. They actually like, make equal size and dimension snowballs for everybody. But yeah, I want to give a shout out to my boy Borg Ronstadt, who won the gold medal in the Yukigassen National Championship last year. So there, I just dropped all kinds of knowledge on you, man.
I've never heard of this before.
There's world tournaments happening, going on everywhere, and it's a big deal, man. I got to get you. Speaking of jerseys, I got to get you like a cool Swedish Yukigassen jersey.
Okay, cool. Yeah. See, that could be an episode in of itself.
Obscure, weird,
obscure sports. We should put that on the list for sure.
Well, it's funny because I looked up like strange stories in sports, obscure stories in sports, and the only thing that like
that comes up is odd sports.
Odd sports. Yeah. Just there's a gazillion different odd sports.
Yeah. I did some searching, but for me, I already knew a couple of odd stories, and by looking up information about those stories, they were on lists of things like strange things that have happened in sports. So I got some ones that were given to me through that. I didn't look up like strange stories.
Did you see the one? There was story was a little bit too long, but where a horse jockey won.
And that's my next story.
It is.
Yes.
Okay. See, great.
This is one that I do know about.
I read that one and I'm like, what? That can't be true. And so I actually Googled it in a different way, and I'm like, well, sure enough, they're Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Yeah, well, that's where I know about that story because of the term that it created. Everyone knows the term, the sweet kiss of death, right? That's
or DOA, I guess you.
And we could be also dead on arrival. Yeah, so the sweet kiss of death. Most people have heard that term. It originated from this story. And I'm going by memory. It had to have happened. It's like the 19-teens or It's early.
It's early. Yeah.
Maybe even like the late 1800s. So I think it's like the early 1900s. And there's a jockey. He wasn't a jockey. That's the problem. His name's Frank Hayes. He was a stableman and a horse trainer. And they were at, I think, the Belmont Parkway. And I think that's in New York. Well, I'm not sure though. Okay, who knows? I think it's New York. And what it was is that there was a race coming up, and they didn't have a jockey, or the original jockey was sick or something. So they needed a jockey, and Frank Hayes was close to the weight of a jockey. He was like 145 pounds. Now, most jockeys are less than 130. You want small people to do this.
Right.
So they wanted him to race the horse. The horse's name was Sweet Kiss. So that's the first part of that, where that term comes from. So he had, I think, 24 hours to drop as much weight as he possibly could so he could ride this horse in the race. And I'm sure didn't eat, was exercising, didn't drink any water. And I think he dropped like 15 pounds in a day.
That's what it was. Mm-hmm.
And he was able to get, I think, close to 130 or even under 130. And he goes out and rides this horse. And yeah, he has a heart attack on the horse. And because of the way he's strapped in the saddle, he doesn't fall out. He's just dead, and the horse is just running the race. And the odd thing was, I'm 99% positive about this. At least this is the lore of the story, is that Sweet Kiss wasn't supposed to do well. It was a 20-1 long shot or a 25-1 long shot. So the fact that they didn't just go get another jockey or find, they didn't put the effort in to get a real jockey to replace it. They said, well, it doesn't really matter. Sweet Kiss isn't winning shit anyways. So get Frank to get on the horse and do it. And the horse won. So
with the dead jockey cruising across the finish line.
With the dead jockey on his back.
Yeah, man, that one's weird.
Right? I'm assuming this is before unions for jockeys.
Oh, yeah. That seems like, I know like in the world of cutting weight, people will do some really extreme things, but even to drop 15 pounds back in those days, you're not using diuretics or anything like that, but and not being under medical care. Yeah, unfortunately, that's not surprising. You know what is surprising? Do you know who the most successful Olympic competitors in history is?
No.
The Emperor Nero.
The Emperor Nero. Okay.
So he won. So he was a huge fan of Greek culture.
Right.
And he brought the Olympics from Greece to Rome, and he named the Olympics, the Neronia, after himself. In the very first Olympics, he won. They had wreaths, right? They didn't have gold, silver, bronze medals. In one Olympics or one Neronia, Nero won 1,808 wreaths in one event. Like an example is he actually won a chariot race that he didn't even finish because the chariot crashed and overturned during the race. But the judges declared him the winner anyhow on the grounds that he would have won if he had been able to complete the race.
Okay, yeah.
And nobody was trying to get, crucified at, a finger snap. So they just figured that they were going to award him wreaths for anything that he did. So another example was he strummed a tune on a lyre, which it wasn't even an Olympic event, but they gave him a wreath for it. Okay. And one of the other things that he did is they wanted to have him as a godlike figure. So the best way to do that is to have the best competitor to have ever competed in the Olympics or in the Neronia.
Okay.
So yeah, after 2,000 years of human history, now we know the best athlete in history, technically,
Okay.
the Emperor Nero.
That's an interesting one.
Crazy, right?
That's going way back.
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't-
obviously the strangest stories are usually the old ones because these sports aren't refined. There's a bunch of weird stuff that can still kind of happen because everything's so new still. But that's going way back. That's going way back.
I like the fact that they awarded him the wreath on the basis he would have won the race if he had completed it.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's an interesting one.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Leave a like on the video. I know you're enjoying this. Can you shut up?
The internet's answer to a question that was never asked. The Tilted Table with Sean and Joe.
I have one I've always found fascinating, and this is fairly recent. I think this was last year, as a matter of fact, 2024. And when I saw the story, I found it to be something that only would happen in fucking baseball. Again, I think a lot of the weird stories come out of baseball. This is a guy that actually played for for the two teams in a doubleheader.
What?
So this is last year. His name's Danny Jansen. He was playing for the Toronto Blue Jays.
Wait, this happened last year?
This happened last year, 2024.
Wow. Okay.
So Danny Jansen, and again, I'm going by memory, so I didn't look this stuff up. There's fans out there, that's not exactly how it went down. But he was playing for the Toronto Blue Jays. It's a doubleheader against the Red Sox. And so he's playing for the Toronto Blue Jays. He has whatever bats he has for the Blue Jays. There's a rain delay. And during that rain delay, a trade finally goes through that sends him to the Boston Red Sox. So when they start the second game of the doubleheader, he just goes and changes into the Red Sox, and he goes plays for the Red Sox.
That is.
So it's so fucking
wild.
baseball. It's so fucking baseball.
Yeah. That's crazy, man.
So I thought that was funny when I heard that. I think he is still the only person in history to play for two different teams in the same game. Now, there are players that have played for two different teams on the same day. I think Pete Rose did this.
He did?
Where I might be wrong, but he played for the Montreal Expos for like
hot minute,
like a half a season or some shit like that.
Right. And
I think when he was traded to Montreal, their game, because their candidate was some weird time, so he already played the game he was playing with the Phillies or the Reds, whoever he was with at the time. And then they shipped him out to Montreal, and he got there in time, and they suited him up. So he played two different teams on the same day, but not in a double header.
That sounds like something Charlie Hustle would have done.
Yeah, totally. He was a freak like that.
Yeah, if you were to look at, under all of his skills and accomplishments, that totally hits. Switching gears, how about like in the same vein here, but goofiest sport? Did you know there's a sport called ferret legging?
No, I mean, I think you can almost guarantee any sport that you bring up that's some weird, obscure sport, I probably don't know about it.
There is so many. Finding these like cool stories like the Pete Rose one, you really got to do some digging and actually know something like that might have happened to go, backtrack and find the actual articles.
Right.
But man alive, I had a blast looking at things that were actually competitive. So ferret legging is where participants try to keep two ferrets in their pants for the longest period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently there's a ranking. So it's not just like some YouTube video or a viral reel on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Like apparently there's like actual standings on who is a ferret legging champion, which I think that would be a really fun thing to be able to list on your resume under skills and accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
And if you went for a job interview and it's like, well, Sean, you've had a really good academic career, but I'm not really interested in asking you any of those questions. Tell us about your career in ferret legging.
My question is there people make any money doing this stuff?
No, come on, man.
I mean, but there's got to be some kind of audience for it. They got to make something, right?
Pay-per-view streams? I don't know. I don't know. It almost seems like it would be like on an OnlyFans type of deal to try and generate some revenue. That's wild. It kind of falls under there's a old. I'm sarcastically using my Dr. Evil quote fingers here.
Mm-hmm.
Cheese rolling, where participants would chase a wheel of cheese down a steep hill, trying to see who could get their wheel of cheese across the finish line first.
Okay.
And apparently it was a week-long event. That's a lot of cheese rolling.
Interesting.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's a tribute to the human mind. Anything and everything that can be made competitive, somebody's figured out how to do it.
Yeah, I think the odd sports, that could be a whole, episode of itself. We should really dive into some odd sport, because I'm telling you, I mean, we can have odd stories of things that have happened, but I think the odd sports that we could find, if we really combed the entire globe, we would find some fucking weird ass games that people play. But I'm more interested in the fans of these things. They're more interested in the actual sport of the game. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I got one for you. A lot of people don't know about this one. At least the people I've talked to that know football don't know about this one. And I had to look it up just to verify it, because it's a story I've heard from my father years and years ago. And when I was a kid, he would tell me about this game. So prior to the merger in the NFL, there was the AFL and the NFL, championship. So this is the championship game in the NFL, but not the Super Bowl. This is 1940. Chicago Bears are playing Washington. And again, this is what would have been the equivalent to the Super Bowl at that time, right? It's the championship game. And they're playing the game, and of course, as they're scoring touchdowns, they're kicking the extra point. And this is pre-net era. They kick the ball through the goalposts. It's going into the stands. And the score in this game got so out of control that at some point the refs realized they're running out of balls, right? So they don't have enough balls to complete the game. So both teams are real close in scoring. And again, I'd have to look up. I did look it up, but I didn't look that closely at the scores. It was a high score, it was like 70-0. So like Chicago is just lamb-blasting the Washington Redskins, and of course every time they score they have to kick the extra point. And at some point they stopped kicking extra points and said, well, we're no longer going to allow extra points. You're going to have to run it in for the extra point, because they didn't want to lose losing the balls. And they ended the game 10 minutes early because the last ball that they had, the guy scores a touchdown and throws it up into the stands because it went out of excitement. So it's like, well, we're out of balls.
That was it.
That was it. Now, I don't know how much of this is accurate in terms of like, well, can't you just ask the fans, give us the damn ball back so we continue the game. I think part of it is it was 73-0 or something.
Hit
the game
the
was over.
mercy rule.
Yeah, basically like a mercy rule.
Yeah.
Right. So when they talk about Deflategate and Tom Brady, I mean, yeah, but have you had a game where you absolutely ran out of equipment? And that's what I love about these old stories. Is like only in like pre-1940s, football would you have like, we ran out of balls. Right. we don't have enough equipment. We don't have enough balls to play the game.
Man, that's crazy. I got one for you. The Cleveland Indians' worst sports promotion ever. And it took...
Oh, yeah, I know about this. This is the sell beer for like 5 cents a glass.
It was. So let's see. This happened in June of 1974.
Yeah.
They're trying to get, as any, I'm going to pick on baseball here in a second. They're trying to get any butts in seats that they can.
Yeah, and I recall this. I wasn't alive. I was but the stories I heard, so it was against the Rangers, and they think that there was a previous game or some kind of series they had. So there was animosity amongst these two teams.
Yes. So the fans definitely had a bone to pick with each other. And what was funny is they figured, well, they had a a 5-cent beer night a couple years prior, and it went off without a hitch. And by the Cleveland Indians offered a 5-cent beer night. And so they figured, well, we're going to do this again for a 10-cent beer night. This time, over 25,000 people showed up for it, but they weren't there for the baseball game and competitiveness and whatnot. They're there for cheap booze. And so there's all these stories about, people lining up in line to get, 6 beers at a time per person, hammer them down. And then so by like the third inning, most of the fans in the stadium were just completely wasted. To the point in the second inning, there is a large, heavyset woman that stormed the field, flashed her boobs, and then tried to kiss the umpire.
Yeah, there was a woman that jumped onto the field and flashed everybody, and tried to sexually assault the umpire. I remember that part of the story.
And that was only the second inning, and then the ballpark goes wild. Fans start passing joints around, setting off firecrackers, and a guy ran naked onto the field and slid into second base. I mean, it was absolute pandemonium in the middle of the baseball game.
Yeah, and this is before, because they do things like this in games where they might offer even alcohol at a reduced price. But you can only buy. You can't buy like 5 glasses at a time, kind of thing. And I think that was part of the problem, was the lines had gotten so long, and like people were buying like 6, 7 beers at a time because nobody wants to stand in line.
No. When I read that story, though, I was like, that I'd never actually heard that one before. And that was pretty darn hilarious. Probably changed the stadium etiquette forever after that.
That was a big. Again, I heard about these stories, from my dad. That was the key to when they started like locking down on alcohol, at least being more mindful of it. It was basically a riot at a baseball game.
Well, and the end of the story was the Indians actually had to forfeit the game because the fans were storming the field and trying.
Well, one guy jumped on the field. I think he like assaulted, not only assaulted, like he didn't like hit the guy, but like jumped on him, like tried to rip off his jersey, stole his hat or something. Yeah, and it was like in the middle. It was because they had calmed enough people down, and they got everything kind of reset. And here comes another jackass. Yeah. So they just said that the Indians had to forfeit the game because it was their fans. It was, I think it was at their home.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep.
So another story I want to talk about is the story of Damon Giuseppe. Do you know who this guy is?
I think I've never heard of this guy.
Okay, so I'm gonna say, and his full name is, I think he Giuseppe Damon. I'm gonna go just call him Damon Giuseppe. So Damon Giuseppe is a wide receiver, played for a community college. I believe it was in Arizona. I might be wrong about that, but it doesn't matter. So here's a kid. He's in junior college. He's trying to live his football dream, and he can't get a college, a university deal, and his playing career ends. So this is like 2017, 18.
Okay.
And in 2019, he's playing for, I think, Mesa Community College. And this is the end of the road for him. And he decides, since he can't get a university, a D1 scholarship, that he is going to just go to the Cleveland Browns and lie his way into the workout after the draft, claiming that he's an undrafted free agent that was called in to try out. And he went to the facility and did it. He was convincing enough, even though his name was not on the list. He convinced them there must be some kind of mistake, and they let him onto the field. This guy worked out for the Browns for like 2-3 days, and the coaches had no idea that he wasn't supposed to be there.
Wow. And how did it go?
So it didn't. He wasn't that great, but he was pretty decent. And ultimately, when they figured out that you're not supposed to be here, you've been, he this way, and it made news. The Browns may have done this more for a PR move. They basically pulled him back in and said, you know what, you did really well on the field. We're going to give you a contract or something. And I think they actually tried to get him in. They got him in preseason or something. And but of course he didn't make the cut. But he made a lot of news headlines.
It vaguely remember something like that.
Yeah, and he plays, I think, for the UFL right now. So he plays football.
Still bouncing around.
But yeah, for the balls of somebody, to walk onto a field, lie your way into a facility, saying like, "Yeah, I'm an undrafted free agent out of whatever university he lied about," because I don't think he ever went to a university. He was just coming straight out of community college, and get to practice for a couple of days before they figure it out. And again, this is 2019 when he did this. Like, it surprises me that you can get away with this. Again, if this was like the 1930s, 40s, 50s,
oh,
50s,
for sure.
I think it'd be super easy to to do this kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
But he was apparently a really good community college football player. He just didn't get any offers, and I guess he was getting frustrated, and basically said, "Well, I'm just going to go to the workout facility or the practice field, and just claim that I'm an undrafted free agent."
Did you subscribe to his YouTube channel to like follow him at this point?
No, I've never really dealt with him. I just remember seeing the story on the news, and I think probably in the last year or so, it dawned back in my head, and I kind of looked him up, and there's a bunch of people that have done stories about him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, when you think about your dream, a lot of people, they say this is my ultimate goal in life, and I'm willing to sacrifice and do anything.
Everything.
Most people wouldn't do something like this. And what I find interesting about that is that at the end of the day, this isn't really that big of a deal to lie to get yourself into a practice facility, lie and say that, "Oh, I am on the team. They picked me up off the free agent wire." Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to figure out like, "No, we didn't," right? And then you're not going to be let in. And maybe that's why people don't do things like this. They don't think they can get away with it. I do find it funny, though. In 2019, you have what I'm assuming is a closed-off facility. I think for most people, it would be hard to walk on to a practice field with the players. If you're not part of the team, you ain't getting in, right?
Right.
And so for a guy to walk into a room in 2019 with all the coaches, like what I can't understand is he's on the fucking field and they're calling names out. First of all, there's the draft picks. The people they drafted, they should know them right off the bat. But of course, there's all these undrafted rookies that they bring in. Mm-hmm. I would assume they would know all of them. Like we know who we called.
Yeah, especially with like all of the scouts. They have with teams and staffers and assistants to assistants and.
Maybe that's why it worked. Maybe it was easy for one scout to say like
so complicated that somebody just slips through the cracks.
Yeah, there's too many heads. Like somebody like a scout or like a coach could be out there and go like, "What's your name? Giuseppe. I don't recognize. I don't know the name or whatever," and then just think like, well, he must have been the other coach or the other scout or somebody else must have called him in or something, right? That's the only thing I could assume happened. The only thing is that there's a wide receivers coach and you're coming onto the squad and you're a wide receiver. Know. They would be like, "Who are you? You're nobody I picked up. You're nobody I called." I
think we got to say good on him to a degree because. Of course, of all franchises, he picked the one that would fall for it and is perennially making bad decisions.
That's true, yeah.
Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, you think he would be able to pull this off on the Patriots?
No. Go to the Dolphins or something. No. The Browns? Oh, yeah, I can see that happening.
I think the Browns, the Raiders might, and I'm a Raider fan too, the Raiders might be duped for something like this. I could see this happening in Las Vegas.
But yeah, definitely nowhere else, though. Yeah, so... Good on him. Giuseppe, what was his last name?
That's his last name. His name is Damon Sheehy Giuseppe. He plays currently for the Arlington Renegades in the UFL.
Okay.
And again, largely, I think he was able to at least secure some kind of football career because of this bold move to just act like, well, you signed me up. It's like that old Seinfeld episode where George quits. And then when he's talking to Jerry about, like, I quit my job today, but he's regretting doing it, he's like, "Why don't you just go back on Monday and act like you didn't quit?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Just show up." And it's like, if somebody says you quit, like, "No, I didn't." Like, you're right. And that's what he does. He goes back and he just acts like it's a normal day. And it's like, "You quit on Friday." He's like, "No, I didn't."
You must have been hearing things.
Well, I think in the episode, he tries to play it off like, "Oh, I was just joking around." Like, come on. Right? So it's like that idea that, like, if I tell you that I'm supposed to be here enough, well, yeah, I guess he's supposed to be here, right? Giuseppe just walks on the field and he's just like, "Hey, you know what? No, I'm here. I'm supposed to be. You guys called me." Yeah.
Yeah, I got swagger, man.
I mean, look at me. I'm wearing Cleveland Brown shorts. I'm on the field. How else would I be here if you didn't call me in to be here?
Mm-hmm. There is a streak of genius in there.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm. And like I say, good on him for having the cojones to show up and work through all of that.
Right. I'm going to get his jersey.
Do they? Well, I guess you could have that one made. That's pretty clever, though, man.
I have an important announcement for you, so stay tuned.
Yo, that's some next level shit, bruh.
So you got me. Big deal.
The internet's answer to a question no one asked. The Tilted Table with Sean and Joe.
Folks, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Tilted Table, the internet's answer to a question that no one asked. I am Sean Kabibi.
And I am Joey Joe, the Fraggy Mac.
And we are going to go play some ferret weasel. What was that sport again?
Ferret panting or something? Yeah. Hey, I just want to, I'm super excited to learn that the Emperor Nero is the most decorated Olympic athlete of all time.
Yeah, I should get his jersey.
Hey.
Yeah. Peace.